Did you know that the Samsung Galaxy has 4 cameras while the iPhone sticks to 3? But let's see if one extra camera is really a game changer or not. In my daylight image quality comparison, starting with the ultra wide angle cameras, we can clearly see that the Galaxy creates a punchier look with more saturation and with more contrast, while the iPhone sticks to its more neutral look. And while you can decide which look you prefer, it is undeniable that at every step of the way the Galaxy produces sharper and more detailed photos thanks to its additional 3x camera, while the iPhone becomes less and less detailed as we move up from the main 1x cameras closer to the 5x cameras. But also in the zoom category, the Galaxy's 50 megapixel 5x camera dominates the iPhone's 12 megapixel 5x zoom in image quality detail. In low lights, the Galaxy's ultra wide angle camera produces a better exposure and sharper photos. And the Galaxy also creates better photos at 1x and 2x zoom. However, from 3x up to 5x zoom, the additional 3x camera of the Galaxy performs significantly worse than the iPhone, given that the Galaxy's 3x camera has an aperture of f2.4, whereas the iPhone still relies on its main camera with a wider aperture up to 5x zoom. But what really surprised me is that the 5x camera of the Galaxy does produce sharper and more detailed photos in low light, despite the iPhone's 5x camera having a wider aperture. This may be due to the Galaxy's 5x camera relying on pixel binning with its greater 50 megapixel sensor, whereas the iPhone's telephoto camera only has 12 megapixels. In good lighting, both the iPhone 16 Pro Max and the Galaxy S24 Ultra create stunning macro photos. We could, however, argue that the iPhone creates slightly more detailed macro photos, as it also has a slightly shorter minimum focus distance, but the conversation changes when comparing low light performance. As you can see, the iPhone's macro photo gets very soft, whereas the Galaxy preserves more detail in low light. Both smartphones support 1x, 2x, and 5x portraits. However, the Galaxy, thanks to its additional 3x camera, also has a 3x portrait mode. Now, do you like the more saturated look with more contrast from the Galaxy, or the more balanced look of the iPhone? I think this category comes down to personal taste. Now, what if you were to take a full resolution RAW photo to edit it yourself without the smartphone's adjustments? Which smartphone would capture a greater dynamic range to offer more editing flexibility? I stress tested all cameras of both smartphones and exposed the RAW photos for the highlights, lowering the overall exposure so the highlights were preserved. Then in Lightroom, I applied a preset that opens the shadows all the way to expose how much dynamic range each smartphone can preserve. Clearly, the scene requires a great dynamic range, but as you can see, both smartphones struggle with the details in the shadows. However, the iPhone leaves a cleaner result. You can decide for yourself, but I suggest that the iPhone performs better across all cameras when it comes to capturing RAW photos. These results are also consistent with the Galaxy S23 Ultra and the iPhone 15 Pro Max. When it comes to color grading your photos straight out of the camera app, the Galaxy has filters that you can apply and adjust, and you can also download additional filters. Furthermore, you can select a photo to create your own filters, which I think is an interesting feature to play with. And when capturing video, you can also apply these filters when capturing 1080p, but your video can't be 8K or 4K. It has to be Full HD or lower resolution. On the iPhone 16 Pro Max, you have the new generation photographic style settings, which are excellent for color grading, and you can also apply them when capturing portraits. Both smartphones allow you to adjust these effects after the photos are captured. The iPhone doesn't have a filter though, or color grading for when capturing video, but the iPhone has something far superior when recording video, which leads us into the video category. What is arguably the strongest video feature of the Samsung Galaxy smartphone is being able to capture 8K video. But keep in mind that the 8K coming from the Galaxy smartphone is compressed and does not support HDR, log, or RAW formats. If you get your lighting right though, you can capture decent and usable footage in 8K, and keep in mind that 8K is massive, as it is 4 times the resolution of 4K, and 4K being 4 times the resolution of 1080p. So if you ever need to crop your footage, 8K is the way to go. But at the end of the day, the iPhone remains the preferred choice for video professionals, given the tremendous ProRes abilities. The flexibility and dynamic range that you have with Apple's ProRes is simply quite impressive. And when comparing the HDR video of both smartphones, the iPhone can sustain a noticeably greater dynamic range than the Galaxy. I was very surprised when doing my low light video comparisons. I captured 4K in 30 and 60 frames per second going through all the cameras. The iPhone completely smokes the Galaxy, particularly when capturing video with 60 frames per second. At 3x zoom, the Galaxy relies on its additional 3x camera, while the iPhone still relies on its main camera for 3x zoom. But unlike in the photo comparisons, the Galaxy is nowhere near producing the same video quality as the iPhone in low light. And when comparing the 5x cameras, we see the worst performance by the Galaxy with the worst drop in exposure when capturing 4K 60 frames per second. The Galaxy has a 12 megapixel f2.2 selfie camera with an equivalent focal length of 25mm, and the iPhone has a 12 megapixel f1.9 selfie camera with an equivalent focal length of 23mm. So the Galaxy captures a slightly deeper depth of field and therefore also a sharper image, while the iPhone has a slightly shallower depth of field. Thanks to the wider focal length, the iPhone selfie camera is a bit more convenient to take handheld selfies with, and in low lights, both selfie cameras switch to long exposure photography, and I find that the Galaxy produces a cleaner image. However, when recording video in low light, the Galaxy is once again no match for the iPhone, particularly when recording 4K at 60 frames per second. On the iPhone, you can use all cameras for action mode. However, on the Galaxy, you're limited to the wide angle and main cameras only for what they call super steady on the Galaxy. Now keep in mind that when you are capturing action mode on the iPhone, you don't see the stabilization in real time on screen. When reviewing the footage, I think the Galaxy is shakier than the iPhone when it comes to action or super steady mode. The iPhone does a smoother job than the Galaxy to stabilize the video. Both smartphones can capture a maximum of 240 frames per second in 1080p, and both smartphones can record 4K 120 frames per second. However, with the iPhone you can use multiple cameras to capture 240 frames per second, and on the Galaxy you're only limited to one camera, the main 1x camera. And on the iPhone you could also capture the 4K 120 frames per second in ProRes with an external storage device. When it comes to time-lapse video, the Galaxy can create 4K time-lapse videos with 30 frames per second. You can use all your cameras except the 5x camera, which makes no sense given that the 5x camera has 50 megapixels available and 4K only requires 8 to 9 megapixels. The iPhone, on the other hand, can create 1080p time-lapse videos with 30 frames per second, and you can use all your cameras including the 5x camera. Both smartphones allow you to choose a focus point by tapping on the screen and adjusting your brightness. However, while the iPhone is only limited to those functions in time-lapse mode, the Galaxy allows you to set a timer and also choose a time-lapse speed preset. When capturing this time-lapse of the moon moving in the sky, I learned how awful the Galaxy does when it comes to low light time-lapse video. But in ideal lighting conditions, I would choose the Galaxy given that it can create 4K time-lapse videos, whereas the iPhone can only produce a lousy 1080p time-lapse video. With third-party apps, you could potentially produce better time-lapse videos on both smartphones. I tested and compared all the cameras, and I'm very confident to conclude that the iPhone's autofocus system is faster than the Galaxy's. I did multiple tests in low light as well, and the iPhone's autofocus is also better in low light. I'm recording in a noisy environment with the Galaxy S24 Ultra. Once my recording is finished, there's nothing I can do about the noise. However, when recording audio video with the iPhone 16 Pro Max, we got the new audio mix settings. Which will allow you to isolate your vocals, for instance, to get you more desirable audio. So the audio category has to go to the iPhone. And last but not least, here's how each camera handles the lens flare, starting with the wide-angle cameras going to the 1x and 5x cameras. And the Galaxy also has that additional 3x camera. You can decide which smartphone handles lens flare better. Which of the two smartphones do you prefer and why? The results speak for themselves. In the photo category, the Galaxy outperforms the iPhone pretty much throughout the entire zoom range when it comes to resolution and detail, with the exception in low light from 3x zoom up to 5x zoom. That's where the iPhone did outperform the Galaxy. However, when it comes to video performance, the iPhone does outclass the Galaxy thanks to the ProRes ability, which does offer professional video editing flexibility, and also the much better low light performance when it comes to video, particularly when capturing 60 frames per second. These are two powerful smartphones with different operating systems, with different hardware and different philosophies ultimately built into them. And I'm not here to tell you which smartphone you should buy. I'm simply here to present you the data, and you can determine on your own which smartphone is better for you. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section down below. And if you're still watching this video, you might as well subscribe to my channel and hit that like button, and stay tuned for my upcoming content.